This is a fit mess with Zach and Jeremy.
Well, okay, we can't put it off any longer.
We actually could.
Should we?
Sure, let's come back and do this later.
Just hang on. Okay, yeah, no time like the present. Here we go. It's the Fit Mess. I'm Jeremy. That's Zach.
What's up, everyone?
We are joined this week by Sifu Karl Romain. He's a world champion kung fu fighter. More importantly, he's really good at not putting stuff off. He's an expert at not procrastinating. He's got a podcast and a book and all that stuff that we'll tell you all about in just a little bit. But we are talking to him this week about procrastination because if you heard our last episode, you heard that was a major factor in why it took us a month in between episodes to get that last show done. And so we figured let's try and focus on fixing that part of our lives a little bit. I know for me, a big reason why I tend to put things off like that has to do with perfection or perfectionism. It has to do with low self-esteem and feeling like I'm not capable of doing something well enough or doing it at all. And that last episode, I think, spoke to that, and I think revealed that a little bit. And so a lot of times it is just a matter of taking one step and trying to push forward and get the thing done that you're putting off because it's really not that painful.
Yeah, agreed. I've always struggled with procrastination. I think in the last few years, just as some of the projects that I've been working on have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and it turns into a big elephant. It's really tough to get around procrastination because everyone does it. It's such a natural thing. It's so easy. It's so easy to do.
Well, and it's really easy, I think, because when there is something that you don't want to do or you're not excited to do, you're not motivated to do, it's really easy to inflate that thing into this huge mountain or elephant, as you referenced. And like anything, whether it's getting ready to go to work and you don't want to that morning, or that project that you've got to get turned into your boss, or that homework that you've been putting off or whatever, it's always a matter of the little steps you need to take to get it done. And when you can really focus on that and really decide, how to break that out into smaller projects, it's way less intimidating and way less likely to be put off and to cause you to be so anxious about it and have it really dominate so much of your life when it really, whatever it is, doesn't have to be that big of a deal.
No, it doesn't have to be. But for a lot of us, myself included, it has always been a big deal. I always use the excuse that I work better under pressure, and that's why I procrastinate, right? And I actually am really good at getting things done at the last minute simply because I've had so much practice.
Well, there's something to be said for that, though, because you so often, if you're given a month to do something that is only going to take an hour, you're not going to do it. And if you took that month and every day spent 5 minutes, I don't think it would be as good as if you spent that focused hour on whatever that thing is. And a lot of times you're not motivated to do it. Motivated to do it.
It's a new word.
Until the clock demands it. Like I can hem and haw all morning long, and I can sip my coffee. Oh God, I got to get ready. I got to make lunch for the kids. Got to make lunch for myself. I just don't want to.
Yeah.
And I'll put it off for just 5 more minutes. Just 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
And then finally it's like time to go. Boom, and you're forced into action by the clock.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've always looked back at procrastination and tried to figure out what it is that's causing me to procrastinate, right? I mean, is it really just truly I don't want to do something?
Right.
Or is there something else going on?
Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot of time, but I was able to, bring it all back to my childhood and the wonderful phrase that my dad always used to tell me after as a kid, I can't, do a task to perfection.
Mm-hmm.
I was a kid, but I would do a task and my dad would always say to me, if you're going to do it right the first time. And that has stuck with me for years and years and years. So whenever I come up against a new task, that's the first thing that comes into my head is I got to do it right the first time. Well, it has to be perfect the first time. Well, I don't know if I can do it perfect, so I might as well not do it. And then I end up not, for as simple as renewing the tabs on my car.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to click the right button? Am I going to pay the right price? Am I going to overpay? Am I going to underpay? Am I going to get arrested because I'm driving a car without tabs? It gets crazy. And that's when my anxiety kind of plays into it a little bit too. So I have battled procrastination, and I still lose on a daily basis, but I think I've won enough small wins with it that I can be a little authoritative when I talk about it.
It's funny that you mentioned the tabs thing, because for me, like on a non-emissions year, no problem. I'll go online, click. Like if it's something I can jump online and do really quick, I will do it, no problem, no worries at all. For me, if it's not a self-esteem related thing, it is something like, oh God, this year I've got to go to the emissions test, and I'm sure when I go I'm going to fail. And then when I fail, I'm going to have to find a mechanic that can fix the thing, and then that mechanic's going to totally screw me, and he's going to tell me that basically my car's not worth the money it's going to take to fix it. So then I'm going to have to go and buy a new car, and then that car is going to need to pass emissions in a couple of years. Like I rabbit hole the shit out of that. But it's not so much I can't do it. There are going to be all these obstacles put in my way to prevent me from doing what should be a simple task of going and buying a sticker to put on my license plate. Yeah. Because that's ultimately all I'm doing.
That's what's called catastrophic thinking.
Yes, that's where I live. That's where this head is most of the time, is whatever the thing is. I'm reminded of the one time I don't know why I'm reminded of this. The one time I tried to learn how to snowboard. I'm going to go down the hill. I'm going to break my neck. I'm going to be paralyzed. This is going to ruin me. Or best case scenario, I'm going to suck and look like an idiot, and everyone's going to laugh, and I'm going to be humiliated. I never go to, I could probably do this.
So did you ever learn to snowboard?
I spent an afternoon doing it badly.
Nice.
Yeah. At least maybe 2 afternoons.
At least you tried.
I did try. Yes.
Yeah. As I've gotten older, the mortality thing has kicked in. Certainly.
Oh God, big time.
That's a good reason to procrastinate a lot of things for me. Like going to the grocery store, because I don't want to get into an accident.
Right.
So, of course, I can't go to the grocery store and get milk.
You're not safe. You're not safe.
So, it's just going to blow up into a bigger thing.
It's funny, the do it right the first time thing. A well-intended phrase. I mean, clearly the idea is really focus and do a good job. Don't screw around.
Yeah.
The other side of it, obviously a toxic one for you. The one I always heard was, and not necessarily growing up, but I heard it at some point and it stuck with me, was, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, you certainly don't have time to do it right the second time.
Yep.
Which I think works a little better, at least for me. I get the intention more of don't waste the time screwing it up if you're just going to end up going back and doing it again. Which is funny because so much of my life I've always, I think I know where I learned this, and we won't get into that now, but I've always thought I could find the shortcut to accomplish the thing I wanted to accomplish. And 9.9 times out of 10, I end up having to go back and go through the proper channels to do the thing, because that's just the way the world works.
Right.
And I end up wasting all that time thinking, oh, I got this. Look at this shortcut I can take.
I'd be interested offline to hear about the 0.1 times that the shortcut has worked.
Oh, occasionally. Occasionally it pays off. Very, very rarely. But for the most part, hoop, jump, hoop, jump, hoop, jump.
Yes. But I don't like jumping through hoops, so I'll procrastinate that.
Exactly. We'll get around to that later.
Yeah.
So, procrastination. What is it? Why do we do it? These are all the things we discussed in a conversation with our guest this week. His name is Sifu Karl Romain. He has a new book titled Unbreakable. You can find more information about him at his website, overcomingobstacles.online. He likes to refer to himself as the life coach in your pocket. So we asked him, Coach, why do people procrastinate?
Well, there are many reasons why people procrastinate, but let me give you 3 specific reasons. The first reason is that the goals that they've set for themselves are too overwhelming. And it's like a deer in headlight, they're just stuck, right? So they need to break those goals down into smaller chunks that are manageable, so it's not so overwhelming and frightening to them. The second reason why people procrastinate, and the overall arching reason why people procrastinate is really fear-based, right? And another reason why people procrastinate is perfectionism. They want everything to be perfect, all the conditions. They want the results to come out perfectly, and they want to perform perfectly. But you know what? There's never a perfect moment. And one of the things I try to share with people is that we don't want perfection. We want excellence. We want to constantly improve and get better at what it is that we're actually doing. And the third reason people procrastinate is they don't ask for help. When we're trying to accomplish a big goal, it can be daunting, and there could be many different things that we have to get done. And so asking for help becomes something that's very relevant in accomplishing your goals. And sometimes asking for help is as simple as, maybe asking a peer, a friend, a parent, or even hiring a coach if that's what it takes to accomplish your goals. So those are three main reasons that I believe people procrastinate.
It's funny you mentioned the perfectionism aspect, and that's something Zach and I were talking about before we hit record here is I feel like for me, I procrastinate for kind of two reasons, and they both are rooted in perfectionism. And one is self-esteem and feeling like I'm not capable, I'm not good enough to do whatever the thing is, and ultimately whatever the thing ends up being is not going to be good enough to have put in the effort. So it's way easier to just, throw on a video game or do something that's a huge waste of time and put it off until I absolutely have to. Is that pretty common in what you've experienced?
That's very common. And on the podcast, Overcoming Obstacles, I actually talk about that. I talk about how self-esteem can really create some challenges, and what you want to do is take an honest assessment of your attributes and your skills. So if you think about a major goal that you have that you've been procrastinating on, for instance, what are the attributes or skills necessary to achieve them? And write those down. And then take an honest assessment of yourself. Maybe you ask 3 or 4 friends, what do you think are some of my best attributes or skills? And you'd be surprised that you probably are already in possession of the skills and attributes that you need to actually achieve your goals.
My history with procrastination is long, and I've been doing it forever, and mine is very fear-based as well. It's, I have a fear of failure, so anything short of perfection is a failure for me. So I get a little double dipping into 2 different areas that really drive me down a bad road. I think those are pretty common, though, with a lot of people. It's
very common.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about what people can do to get over fear of failure specifically.
Fear of failure is a big one. And there's a couple of different steps that they can take. And one of the things is recognizing what failure means to you. For most people who succeed, we understand that it's important to make mistakes, right? I never see failure as failure, only as a learning opportunity, and I learn from my mistakes. That's how we grow. It's possible. I don't know about how you came up or how you were brought up, but maybe when you made mistakes in the past, you were actually punished for it, right? And I think it's an important lesson to recognize that it's okay to make mistakes, and that's part of how we're going to grow and become who we want to be, right? Or accomplish the goals that we want to accomplish. So I think that's one thing that you definitely may want to consider really looking at, is really redefining what failure means to you, and then really asking yourself, okay, when I make a mistake or when I don't achieve a goal, what did I learn from this? How can I improve? How can I get better? But really, what did I learn from this? And I think all of that will make a difference for you. I also think a big part of that is confusing needs and wants, right? In our lives, there are certain things that we absolutely need to be alive, right? Food, shelter, clothing, right? The necessities of life, those are our needs, right? And then there's some other things that we want, but we look at them and we say, I absolutely need this, right? I really need this. And that mental error, that mental mistake, what we call a mental mistake in CBT, really kind of prevents you or holds you back, or can create this feeling of procrastination. I don't want to move forward because what if I don't get what I want, right? So you really want to look at that. Are you mixing up your wants and your needs? And if this doesn't happen, could I live without it? Would that be okay?
Well, it's mentioned you talk about being able to live without it. This gets into what I wanted to ask you about. I was reading a little bit about procrastination, and aside from not accomplishing goals or not meeting the needs or wants that you're trying to set up for yourself, but it actually, there's been some research into how bad it can be for you physically to procrastinate.
Mm-hmm. Yes. What happens is it can create anxiety when you confuse your needs and wants, right? It can create this feeling of, well, I can't stand when this happens, or I can't live without this. And anxiety is like a physical reaction to something, right? It's part of that whole fight or flight syndrome, right?
Yeah.
And so when that happens, it's easy to get stuck. It's easy to kind of say, okay, I'm going to blow this off and not deal with this right now because I really can't handle it, right? It's how you communicate with your inner self. Your thoughts create your emotions and your behaviors. So having a different thought about it could actually change the way that you go about doing things.
So I was listening to your podcast a little bit, and you were talking about this, and you sort of talked about two different elements of procrastination in terms of the task itself and the forces that cause it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. In terms of the task itself, breaking it down into measurable, manageable steps. It's like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time, right? Then try to take on the whole task in one step, right? Break it down to small portions. It's kind of like, what was that movie where they're playing football and he's speaking to the team any given Sunday, and he says, football is a game of inches, right? And sometimes life is a game of inches. Every time we accomplish a goal, not only does it raise our self-esteem, but it moves us forward towards the next thing that we want to accomplish. So I think if we approach things that way, it may help us to overcome procrastination.
Do you struggle yourself, or did you at some point struggle with procrastination?
I think everybody struggles with procrastination at some point. I think there's different levels to it, right? I think for me, before my accident, I felt like, I had time to accomplish my goal. I was young, but my goal was to be a world champion by age 22. So, you're competing, you're doing your thing, you're kind of moving forward. After my accident, I definitely had a greater sense of urgency. And so I think whatever areas I was procrastinating on towards accomplishing it were gone at that point. It became much more relevant. And I hope it doesn't take that for other people out there listening to this podcast to move forward and take action today on their goals, but to recognize that, little things I do today will get me where I want to go. So just start moving forward.
It's interesting you mentioned I had kind of a similar situation where I was involved in a bike accident a couple of years ago, and it sent me into a pretty unhealthy spiral after that. But having that sort of near-death experience was sort of a trigger for me that opened me up to, any day on the way to work could be the last day on this bike or on this earth.
Right.
And so it is interesting how sometimes it takes something major like that to shake you into action to do things. But other times, we've talked about this on our show quite a bit, that sometimes it's just a matter of the result of the thing you're putting off being more comfortable than not doing it. You know what I mean? Like by remaining comfortable and not doing it, it's really hard to get motivated to do the uncomfortable thing.
Sure, that's the pain and pleasure principle.
Right.
I just talked about that in my last podcast because what happens is I think you actually, there's something you're gaining, right? When you're procrastinating, and let's say you're playing video games or you're, maybe you're on social media procrastinating, right? Like a lot of people scroll through their Facebook or Instagram, right? There's a pleasure that you're getting from it, and there's a pain that you're avoiding. And if you can actually look at that and think about how you can turn that around and ask yourself some questions, right? What will I gain, or how will my life be different by accomplishing this goal? That could help to move you forward. But the pain and pleasure principle is a big part of what you're talking about right now.
So I've got a question for you that relates to my own procrastination. And I think a lot of people struggle with this, at least the people I talk to. And I want to hear, your direct advice to somebody. If I asked you, I procrastinate all the time. I even procrastinate working on my procrastination. It's just too uncomfortable for me. How can I put that discipline in place to take the first step to overcoming procrastination?
Well, again, I would tell you first, take a full accounting of who you are, right? What have you accomplished in your life? What are some major goals that you've accomplished? What are some things that you've overcome? And write them down. And then I want you to make a list of what it took, what skills, what attributes it took to accomplish those things. and circle the ones that keep coming up for you. And what you start to notice is that you have certain skills and attributes that will actually help you in any area of your life. Then I want you to take your goal and break it down into small, measurable steps. You can begin with the end in mind, like if you say, for instance, you want to lose a certain amount of weight in 3 months, for example. So where do you want to be at the end of 3 months, and work your way backwards, right? And figure out where you need to be in a week, so to speak. And then start working towards that goal. And as you have successes, those successes will raise your self-esteem, and as you raise your self-esteem, you'll raise your confidence, and I believe that will help you as well in overcoming, procrastination.
So it sounds like it's not just a simple decision to take the next step. It's a much larger project that one needs to really undertake.
It really is, because I believe in, even looking at my own life, that it's really about being able to assess and evaluate, where am I now, where do I want to go, and what's preventing me from getting there. We all have obstacles in our way or things that are preventing us, and a lot of times it is about our thinking, but it's how do we change our thinking around it, right? How can I shift my perspective? And sometimes that takes a little bit more work than simply making a decision.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned we have all those obstacles, but really, when it comes down to it, those obstacles are only as big as we let them be. We have to make decisions about those obstacles and decide, am I bigger than that, and can I take it down?
Right, because the obstacles are only as big as your imagination.
Yeah, it's true. That's so true. Our thanks again to our guest, Sifu Karl Romain, his website, overcomingobstacles.online, and his book, Unbreakable. And so much of what we were talking about there really comes down to perspective. And you can stop procrastinating on any given project basically once the time runs out, or whatever motivating factor kicks in for you. But if you have a chronic problem of procrastination, it sounds, at least from what I got from that conversation, like that's a bigger deal. That's something that takes a little bit more time and effort to overcome.
Yeah, it's not just something you can decide to stop procrastinating on. You really need to take a little bit of time to do some self-reflection and understand where your procrastination is coming from, why you're procrastinating, and deal with it in an effective way. I mean, you can't just decide to stop procrastinating, because I can tell you from experience, you will procrastinate the shit out of that.
It's fun. I mean, I think you have to make a decision to stop procrastinating and learn how to say the word, but
it's not enough to just make the decision.
Right. That's where it starts. You have to decide, this is hurting my life in one way or another. Either I'm developing hypertension, or my boss keeps busting me for this, or I'm failing in school because of this. Okay, so I've decided I need to do something better. And you really need to get to the root of, why am I doing this? And I think that gets back to so many of the things we talk about on this show. Like, if you have a weight problem that's not related to something medical, a lot of times that is the manifestation of whatever deeper issue that you're masking or hiding from. If you have a drinking problem, if you have a drug problem, I mean, that rarely comes from, I tried a beer once and suddenly was addicted to beer for the rest of my life. Like, if there is some problem that is creating obstacles for you, it is because there's something inside that you're not dealing with. And that is where so often we talk about taking the time to reflect and to, I know in my case, meditation is where I find a lot of those answers, is that this is the heart, this is the thing that's driving me to do this destructive behavior. And then you start reaching out for help to find ways to overcome it.
Yeah. So with all this talk of procrastination, I have to bring up our challenge from last time. You challenged me to take action on one thing that I was procrastinating, right?
Yes, that was a well-timed challenge.
It was a well-timed challenge, and I got to say, I put it off as long as possible. But I did take action on it last night. So interesting. Again, the clock ran out. You knew, we're recording tomorrow. Yeah. I need to be able to say I took action on the thing I needed to do. Yes, I do manage my procrastination based on a calendar for
yes.
a lot of things.
Absolutely.
And that's just one of the things that I use to hold myself accountable. Unfortunately, it's I don't think it's a good way. I feel like I should have inner motivation to get these things done, but my inner motivation is actually pretty weak, so I have to rely on external motivation. So I didn't want to come onto this show and say, no, I didn't do it.
Right.
So thus I did it.
But I think it's important to be able to recognize, and I think maybe we talked to Gretchen Rubin about this, was the idea that if external factors are what motivate you and you're aware of that,
Yep.
you can have a healthy relationship with that. You can realize, I'm not going to do this thing until I have 1 hour left to do it because I know it's going to take an hour and it's not important enough to me to get uncomfortable and do it.
Yep.
And then once that clock ticks, you can go, okay, here I am. This is where I set myself up to be, and now I can do it. There's a healthy way to do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to stop procrastinating. If that's what works for you and you do really good work when you're under the gun, great.
Yeah.
If you get to a point where that's not happening for you anymore, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Because I'm absolutely the same way. I mean, there are things that I put off. I mean, I have a specific task at work that I have to do every 3 months, and it takes about an hour of dedicated work. But if I spent 5 minutes a week on it, I wouldn't have to spend that dedicated hour.
Right.
But I will put it off until like the day before, and the person who is in charge of it is like, hey, where's that thing? I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll knock that out real quick. And it's done.
Yeah. But when I'm in a situation like that too, I've also spent the last 2.5 months like thinking about it on
Yes.
and off. So when the time does come, I really just crank it out. Like I don't have to put a whole lot of thought into it.
Right.
And I don't know, maybe that's just me. I like to think about things and let it, slowly burn over a long period of time. And then I come out with what I think is okay work and other people think is excellent work.
Right.
But
I have the other point where I struggle with procrastination is working out, and this is I guess a follow up to the challenge that you made for me was continuing my workout program. This time with the T25, Sean T's previous one of his previous workouts, and so far I'm on the calendar. I'm doing it appropriately. I haven't done it yet today, and this is one of the things that I struggle with every day. Is that if anything puts me behind in the morning, like, taking too long to get out the door, taking too long to do the things I need to do, it'll haunt me all day going, when am I going to get that in? When am I going to get that in? And that can become a distracting force that prevents me from doing other things I need to do because I keep just going back to, I need to do that thing that is my priority. So, and it's hard because I want to do it. Like I feel like I don't really feel right until I've done it. But when I let external factors get in the way, like expectations at work, expectations from family, whatever, that's when the anxiety starts building up and the frustration builds up because I just want to do this thing and it doesn't take that much time, but it's dedicated time that is for me and I can't be interrupted. Mm-hmm. And finding that is really difficult. So that is definitely one of the places where I don't procrastinate, but if I do give myself that inch where it's like, oh, I'll do that in a little bit, I've got 10 more minutes. Yeah. Then I get hosed, and that's when it can become a disruptive force for me.
Yeah, I run into the same issue with working out because I love the feeling after a workout. Mm-hmm. Love it. The feeling during the workout, I could pass on. But there's just been times where I've gone, like just going backwards, right? I have to be somewhere at 4 o'clock. Mm-hmm. Okay, that means I need to start working out at X time because that'll give me enough time to work out, shower, and then get to wherever I need to go.
Yep.
And then before I know it, I'm like 5 minutes past the time that I set for it. And then I'm like, well, now I don't have time for it.
Right. Or I'm really going to have to cut that shower short. Like you start deducting minute by minute at that point.
Yeah. Like, sometimes I just skip the shower and piss people off. But I have shown up at my daughter's bus stop to pick her up, like fully drenched in sweat.
Wow.
Like, because I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to work out and I don't care if the other parents see me like this.
That's better than showing up at the office dressed the way I'm dressed right now.
That's true.
I rode in this morning and I was like, I didn't sweat that much and we're going to record the thing. I'll take a shower after that. We'll see if I get around to it.
Yeah, you should probably shower now.
I probably should. All right, well, speaking of that, I'm going to go do that now. We should also mention our sponsor, Bravest Brewing Company. You were just enjoying some delicious beers the other night. You were sending me pictures, you son of a... I'm all out. I got to go buy some. But you can buy some on our website, thefitmess.com. Click on the link to Bravest Brewing Company. Use the promo code FITMESS10. You get 10% off your order and enjoy delicious, non-alcoholic craft beers. That's all we've got for you for now. We will be back in a couple weeks with a brand new episode. Feel free to reach out to us anytime on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, any of the social medias. We have the email, info@thefitmess.com. Or you can call our voicemail line, 206-659-7667. Always love to hear your feedback and interact with you as much as possible. And we do have the Facebook group, which we're still slowly trying to get off the ground. So jump over to the Facebook page and join the group, and we will get that thing growing as quickly as possible. Thanks so much for listening and for sharing the word and telling everyone about the show. We appreciate the support. We will be back in a couple weeks at thefitmess.com.
See ya.
Bye.